The transport ship broke through the gray clouds of VelTRIN-5. Its engines roared briefly before going silent, leaving only the sound of wind and distant thunder. Mara stood at the edge of the cargo ramp, her eyes focused and calm. She didn't say a word, not to the pilot, not to the soldiers behind her. She just nodded once and stepped out onto the red soil. The planet was cold. Dry air brushed against her face, and the burned remains of past battles stretched across the hills. Broken machines, shattered armor, and abandoned weapons were everywhere. VelTRIN-5 was a dead world, but not silent. Gunfire echoed somewhere far away. The war hadn't ended yet. Mara walked toward the forward base, her boots leaving no deep marks. A small squad of soldiers watched her arrival with interest. Most were from different species: tall green warriors with 4 arms, short wide creatures with heavy suits, and a few humans like her. But none of them looked like Mara. She wore no colors, no name tag. Her armor was clean but plain. Her face showed no fear, no anger, no emotion, and most importantly, she never spoke. "That her?" one of the alien soldiers whispered to another. "The human ghost?" Another human shrugged. "I heard she finished 10 missions alone. Never said a word." "Captain." Darrow, the squad leader, stepped forward. He was a broad-shouldered human with a thick beard and sharp eyes. "Welcome to VelTRIN-5, he said. "You're late." Mara nodded once. "I don't care how good you are. You follow orders here. Got it?" Another nod. Captain Darrow sighed. "You're with us now. Don't slow us down." Later that evening, the squad moved out on a scouting mission. The sun had dipped below the rocks, casting long shadows. Mara followed silently, her footsteps light. She didn't walk beside anyone. She moved at the edges, half in shadow, half in light. They reached a ridge where they could see a Kirthal outpost. The alien base glowed with cold blue lights. Darrow gave hand signals to the squad. "Observe, do not engage." But something was wrong. Mara's eyes narrowed. She touched Darrow's shoulder and pointed toward the rocks. He frowned. "What?" She pressed her fingers to her lips and then tapped the ground twice. "Trap." Darrow didn't believe it at first, but just as he turned to speak, the mountain ridge exploded. A loud blast shook the earth and fire filled the air. Rocks flew like knives. Soldiers screamed as they fell. Gunfire erupted from every direction. The Kirthal had been waiting. Chaos. Darrow shouted orders, trying to regroup, but it was too late. His team was scattered. Enemy drones flew overhead, scanning survivors. Soldiers ran for cover, some dragging the wounded, others simply vanishing into the smoke. Mara didn't run. She moved through the battlefield like a shadow, fast, quiet, and without panic. A drone passed overhead. She ducked behind a body and waited. When it turned away, she sprinted toward the wrecked command cart and grabbed a signal jammer. Without a word, she planted it under a metal plate and activated it. The drones lost signal. 2 Kirthal soldiers approached from the east, blasters ready. Mara ducked behind a burning vehicle. Her hand reached for her knife, not her gun. She waited until they passed, then slipped behind them. 2 silent strikes, and they dropped quietly. She took their weapons and continued on. By morning, the battlefield was still. The sun rose and smoke covered the sky. Darrow lay against a rock, bleeding. Only 3 squad members were alive, and they were hurt. He opened his eyes, expecting to see Kirthal faces. Instead, he saw Mara. She kneeled beside him, holding out a water pack. You're still here?" he whispered. She gave him the water. No words. Darrow looked around. How did you survive?" No answer. "Where's the enemy?" She pointed to the far ridge. In the distance, several Kirthal outposts burned. Darrow's eyes widened. "You did that?" She stood up and turned away. One of the aliens nearby muttered, "She's not a soldier. She's a ghost." Darrow just nodded. "A ghost who saved our lives." Back at the base, news of the ambush spread quickly. High Command listed Mara's team as lost, until Darrow's injured group returned. They spoke of smoke, death, and the silent human who saved them. But Mara didn't speak. She repaired her gear, checked her weapons, and prepared for the next mission. The enemy camps, whispers began. A Kirthal scout reported seeing a lone figure walking through the fire. Another swore he saw his team disappear without a sound. They called her the Ghost of Silence. To the humans, she was strange. To the Kirthal, she was something worse, an unseen threat. But Mara didn't care what anyone called her. She had a job to do, and she would do it. Without a word. 2 weeks passed since the ambush on the ridge. The official report listed most of the squad as missing or dead. Only a few had returned, and all of them spoke the same name. Mara. But no one knew where she was now. She had not come back to the base. She hadn't sent any signals. It was as if she had vanished into the battlefield. The Kirthal began losing control of the outer zones. Their watchtowers stopped responding. Their weapon stores exploded without warning. Patrols were sent out, but many didn't return. The ones who did came back pale and shaking. She doesn't make a sound, one of them said. You don't see her, you don't hear her, but then, boom, everything goes dark. Some thought it was a ghost. Others believed it was a secret Earth weapon. But those who had seen her, only for a second, knew it was a human. A woman with quiet steps and eyes like ice. Far from both camps, Mara moved carefully through the rocky valley. She had made a shelter from wrecked drone parts and alien camouflage, sheets. She didn't rest much, just enough to stay alive. During the day, she studied the enemy patterns. During the night, she moved through shadows and acted. Her attacks were never loud. She didn't need large weapons or bombs. She used EMP, charges to shut down power. She used smoke and silence to confuse the enemy. Her missions were short, quiet, and deadly. One night, she slipped into a Kirthal supply depot. There were 6 guards, all armed. She used the vents to sneak in. She placed charges under their main energy core and walked away without being seen. 10 minutes later, the depot vanished in a flash of light. No one saw her leave. Back at the human base, Captain Darrow sat in the command tent. His leg was still in recovery, but his mind was sharp. She's alive, he said. The base commander, Colonel Sten, frowned. And how do you know that, Captain? Because the enemy keeps losing ground in zones we haven't even touched. Darrow replied, because no one else fights like her. The colonel shook his head. We don't base strategy on ghost stories. Darrow leaned forward. This ghost is doing more damage than 3 squads combined. On the other side of the battlefield, inside a Kirthal fortress, the alien General Hovrak studied the reports with a deep growl. This, human, he said, tapping the datapad. She breaks into our bases, steals our tech, leaves no sign, and worst of all, she inspires fear. His top soldier, Commander Vrel, stepped forward. Perhaps she's not alone. No, Hovrak said. One shadow moves through the night. One mind. One hand. He stared at the red map before him, where outposts had turned black. Find her, he ordered. Find the ghost. Meanwhile, Mara listened to the enemy's own communication channel. She had hacked into their signals and placed small bugs during her missions. Now she knew what they knew. They were scared. She didn't smile, but inside, she felt one thing: purpose. One evening, while moving across a narrow ravine, she found something unexpected: a small camp, hidden under metal sheets and weak holograms. Inside were human prisoners, soldiers, wounded and weak. Mara scanned the area. No traps, no drones, just one guard, sleeping. She moved silently, knocked the guard out with the back of her hand, took the keys, opened the cages. The soldiers stared at her in disbelief. You're the one, a man whispered. The ghost. She held up her hand. Quiet. She gave each soldier a piece of food and a drink. Then she motioned for them to follow. Not through the road, but through the dark valley. That night, the human base received an emergency signal. A dozen soldiers previously listed as captured arrived at the gates. They were tired, dirty, but alive. "Who rescued you?" the commander asked. One soldier smiled. "She didn't tell us her name, but we know who she is." The legend grew. Alien scouts stopped going out at night. Outposts doubled their guards. Some Kirthal refused to sleep without motion sensors around them. Whispers echoed across camps. "She's watching. She walks without sound. Even your own heartbeat can't warn you in time." Some tried to bait her. They planted false camps, left fake prisoners. But Mara never fell for the trap. She studied everything before acting. She wasn't just silent. She was smart. One night, Mara stood on a cliff looking down at a burning enemy base. Flames lit the sky and smoke rose like dark wings. She listened, not for danger, but for silence. And there it was. The battlefield, once loud and full of pain, had gone quiet, not from peace, but from her. Far away in the alien war room, Hovrak slammed his fist onto the table. "I will not be hunted by one human." He ordered the creation of a special unit, trained in stealth, sound detection, and hunting techniques. Their mission? Catch the silent ghost. They called the new group the Watchers. But Mara already knew. She had heard the whispers, and she was already planning her next move. General Hovrak stared at the silent war map in front of him. The red zones marking Kirthal control were shrinking, replaced with gray. Areas lost without open battles, without warning. No explosions, no large attacks. Just silence. And yet, their forces kept falling apart. Behind him, Commander Vrel entered the room holding a data tablet. "She's moved again," he said. "Another depot destroyed. Power lost in Zone D7. No survivors found." Hovrak's claws tapped the table, slowly. "This ghost has made a fool of us long enough. She's just one human," Vrel said, frustration in his voice. "Exactly," Hovrak growled. "And that's what makes it worse." In the dark plains of Veltrin 5, Mara crouched under the twisted wreckage of an old alien ship. Wind howled through the open fields, but she remained still, her eyes focused on the glowing dots in the distance. She wasn't just hunting anymore. She was watching. The enemy had changed. Guards now moved in groups of 4 instead of pairs. Drones flew slower, but more often. There were new scanning devices on the walls, ones that listened for movement. They were learning, and that meant they were getting ready for something. Back at the human command base, Captain Darrow studied the reports from the recovered prisoners. All of them gave the same story: a silent rescuer, a woman who never spoke but acted with confidence and calm. "She's becoming more than a soldier," he said. "She's becoming a symbol." Colonel Sten shook his head. "We can't use ghosts in our planning, Captain. Not when we have real troops to lead." "She is one of our troops," Darrow said firmly. "And she's doing more than 10 teams combined." The colonel paused. "Then find her. Make contact if she's still alive." Darrow didn't reply. He already knew. She was very much alive. The next night, Mara picked up a strange signal on her scanner. It was weak and broken, but clear enough. To understand, it was a voice, a desperate one. "This is Prison Site 12. Please help us. They're going to execute." Then static. Mara checked the coordinates. It was a trap. Too clean, too obvious. But she had to be sure. She moved through the narrow passes of the canyon, her steps silent on the cracked stone. Her armor blended with the shadows. She avoided all drones, moved past motion sensors, and climbed a broken ridge that overlooked the so-called prison. From the rocks above, she saw it. There were prisoners, real ones, tied near the center. Lights shone down on them. Guards walked in wide circles, but something didn't feel right. There were too many weapons, too many eyes watching. It was not a holding site. It was a stage. Inside the enemy command tent near the site, General Hovrak waited with his watchers. His sharp eyes studied every movement from the high ground. He had prepared everything: snipers, motion traps, silent flyers. "She will come," he said. "She always comes for the weak." Suddenly, one of the monitors went dark, then another, then the main camera. "What's happening?" shouted Vrel. A young technician panicked. "Sir, someone's jamming our signal." "Where?" "From inside the camp." Mara moved like a whisper in the night. She had slipped into the camp earlier than expected. She placed signal jammers under the generator core and rewired one of the watch drones to loop footage. Now the enemy couldn't see anything real. She used a flash pulse to blind the cameras for 5 seconds. That was all she needed. In those 5 seconds, she cut the ropes of the nearest prisoners and motioned for them to run. Quietly, they followed, not asking questions, their eyes wide with fear and awe. She moved to the next group, then the next, all while the Kirthal still believed they had the upper hand. Suddenly, a loud alarm rang through the base. "She's here," one guard shouted. Lights turned red. Spotlights spun in every direction, but they showed only dust and smoke. A flashbang exploded near the control tent, blinding everyone inside. General Hovrak stepped out, roaring, "Find her!" But it was too late. By the time his soldiers swept the area, the prisoners were gone. The camp was in ruins, and in the center of the yard, one single item was left behind: a helmet. Her helmet. Inside it was a small device playing a looped voice. It was Mara's voice, her first words spoken across their system. "I'm coming." That single phrase played on every Kirthal communication line, across all their camps over and over. "I'm coming." Soldiers froze. Some stared at the speakers. Others pulled back from their posts, uneasy. One sentence, one voice. That was all it took. Back in the human base, the message was picked up as well. Captain Darrow played the audio on repeat, his eyes wide. "She spoke," he whispered. Colonel Sten stood behind him, stunned. "This changes everything," the colonel said. Darrow nodded. "It's not just fear now, it's war." In the following days, the Kirthal forces grew tense. Even their leaders felt the pressure. They increased patrols, built new walls, upgraded detection systems. But something strange began to happen. Their own traps started failing, their signals got jammed more often, and at night, they heard her voice, just once, in their own camps. "I'm coming," deep inside a cave. Mara checked her gear. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with focus. She had said her first words after so long, not to talk, but to send a message. The ghost was no longer just a shadow. She had a voice now, and the whole battlefield was listening. The small alien girl sat quietly on a rock near the human camp. Her bright eyes watched Mara carefully. She had followed the ghost into the human territory. Though she was shy and nervous, she trusted Mara in a way she did not trust anyone else. Mara noticed the girl but said nothing. She had grown used to moving alone, but this small being had appeared like a shadow, quiet and steady. The girl's name was Lyra. She was one of the prisoners Mara had rescued weeks before. She remembered the silence of the ghost, the calm in the middle of chaos. One evening by the campfire, Lyra finally spoke. "Why do you not talk much?" she asked softly. Mara looked at her for the first time and gave a small nod. Lyra smiled. "You are like a spirit, a ghost." Mara did not answer. Instead, she pulled a small photo from her pocket, a picture of a young boy smiling with wide eyes. Lyra looked at the photo and then back at Mara. "Is he your family?" Mara nodded again, but her eyes grew distant. Later that night, alone, in her tent, Mara stared at the photo. Memories came rushing back. The battle where she lost her voice. It was months before, on a far planet during another fight. Mara had saved a small child who was trapped under rubble. The boy screamed as the enemies approached. Mara tried to calm him, but a sudden blast hit near her. The shockwave threw her to the ground, and when she woke, she could no longer speak. Doctors said her vocal cords were damaged. But Mara did not feel broken. She chose silence. It was safer. It made her stronger, because words were not needed when actions spoke louder. Next morning, Lyra found Mara practicing simple hand signals and writing notes. The alien girl smiled and took Mara's hand. "You don't have to be alone," she said. "We can help you." Mara looked at Lyra, then at the soldiers training nearby. Slowly, she nodded. That day, Mara began teaching others how to move quietly, how to use shadows, and how to fight without making noise. The soldiers listened and learned. They called it the Way of the Ghost. Meanwhile, the Kirthal prepared for their final attack. General Hovrak was furious. His forces were weak and scared. His outposts were falling one by one. The human ghost had become more than a legend. She was a threat. He gathered his strongest soldiers. "Tonight we end this," he declared. The plan was simple. Lure Mara into a trap with fake prisoners. Surround her with thousands of soldiers. End the ghost once and for all. But Mara was no ordinary soldier. Under the moonlight, Mara and her team moved toward the enemy's trap. The small group was quiet, steady, and ready. Lyra walked beside Mara, holding a small device that could disrupt enemy signals. Mara's eyes scanned the horizon. The camp was surrounded by high walls and guarded by patrols. The trap was real. Mara stopped and raised her hand. "No loud attacks," she whispered with a smile. The team used smoke bombs and silencers. They slipped through shadows like whispers. They avoided tripwires and disabled cameras with careful hands. Mara led the way to the prison area where the fake prisoners were held. Her heart beat steadily. This was her test. Suddenly, an alarm sounded. Traps were triggered. Lights flashed. The Kirthal charged. Mara didn't panic. She signaled her team to spread out. They fought silently but fiercely, disabling guards one by one. She moved through the chaos like a ghost. Her knife flashed. Her hands were fast. She took down soldiers without a sound. Lyra helped free the fake prisoners, guiding them to safety. The battle was long but quiet. When dawn came, the Kirthal camp was in ruins. The fake prisoners were safe, and Mara's team stood victorious. General Hovrak was furious but could not deny defeat. He whispered, "She is no ghost. She is a force." Days later, Mara sat with Lyra and the other soldiers. She finally spoke, not in words, but in actions. She showed the photo of the boy again. Then she pointed to the sky. "Fight for hope." Lyra smiled, understanding more than words could say. Mara's silence was no longer a barrier. It was a message. The battlefield grew quiet. Not because the war was over, but because one human chose to become more than a soldier. She became a symbol, a ghost who fought for peace. The Kirthal forces had retreated, their pride broken. The humans and their allies had won, but the cost was high. Fields were scorched, cities in ruins, and many lives lost. But the story of one soldier had spread farther than the battle itself. Mara, the ghost who fought in silence, had become a legend. In the quiet moments after the war, the soldiers gathered around campfires telling stories of the silent warrior who moved like a shadow, who never spoke but saved many lives. Captain Darrow often sat quietly staring at the photo Mara had left behind. He never heard her voice in person, only the recordings she left in the enemy's camps. "She was more than a soldier," he said softly to the others. "She was hope." But Mara was gone. No one knew what had happened to her after the last battle. Some said she died in the final explosion that destroyed the Kirthal command base. Others claimed she walked into the fog of Veltrin's mountains and vanished forever. The truth was a mystery. Lyra, the small alien girl Mara had saved, had stayed with the humans after the war. She became an ambassador for peace between species, carrying Mara's story wherever she went. One day, while speaking at a gathering of leaders, Lyra told them about the ghost who fought without fear. She was silent. "Yes," Lyra said, "but her actions spoke louder than any words. She taught us all that courage and hope do not need sound to be heard." Years passed. Veltrin 5 slowly healed. Cities rebuilt. Forests grew. and children played where once there was war. But the legend of Mara, the ghost of the battlefield, never faded. In the places she fought, her name was whispered with respect. One afternoon in a quiet valley, a group of Kirthal veterans stood together. They looked over the land where their strongest base had fallen. No one spoke her name. No one dared, for they knew the ghost was still watching. Back in a small human settlement, a recording device crackled to life. The voice was soft but clear. If you hear this, fight in silence, fight with purpose, and never stop moving. The words were Mara's, a message left behind, a final echo. The ghost had disappeared, but her silence still spoke across the stars, and her story would live forever.